Very well. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar about financial aid for international undergraduate students. And this webinar is organized by the Education USA Advising Centers in Estonia and Lithuania. And if you do not know what Education USA is, actually it's a network of more than 100 or 150 information centers all over the world. And our mission is to give accurate and unbiased information about all accredited US higher education institutions. But today we talk about financial aid opportunities, and I'm very glad to see much interest in this important topic, because understanding how financial aid works is often one of the biggest steps toward making an American education both possible and affordable. And it's my pleasure to introduce you our guest speaker, Aaron Bixler from Miami University. And he will uncover all tips and tricks about the financial aid in US. So Aaron, please, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction and for having me here today. Yeah, my name is Aaron Bixler, and I'm the Senior Associate Director for International Enrollment at Miami University in Ohio, which is a little confusing, but we'll get into that in a second. I've worked at Miami with international undergraduate students for over 20 years, so I've learned a few things along the way about how scholarships and financial aid work for international students. I thought I'd start just a little bit of information about my university and then talk a little bit about how scholarships, financial aid for undergraduate student works kind of in the US in general, and then maybe use Miami as a case study for how it works at a specific institution. Again, we are Miami University in Ohio. You can see we're the one that's not in Florida. But we've been there since 1809, so we're over 200 years old. And just to make it even a little more confusing, we're in a town called Oxford, but it's not in the UK. It's in southwestern Ohio, outside of Cincinnati, which is a metro area of a little over 2 million people. That's kind of the general region where we are. So with that out of the way, we're considered a mid-sized university by US standards. We have about 18,000 students. About 16,000 of them are bachelor's degree students. So that undergraduate bachelor's degree students are our main focus. And our students do come from all over the US and all over the world to study here. Um, One thing that you'll read if you look at our website or if you look at any kind of our publications, you'll see this badge that says Original Public Ivy. And I get a lot of questions, what does that mean? Are you in the Ivy League? We are not. The Ivy League is a group of about 8 private universities on the East Coast of the US. They're certainly very famous and very well known. But a number of years ago, an influential book was written that listed 8 public universities that offered a comparable experience, but at a public university price. And Miami was one of those 8 original public Ivies, and something we're proud of. So you'll see that listed on our website and such. We're listed along schools like University of Virginia or University of California, Berkeley. So it's something that we take pride in. And what that really means for you as a bachelor's degree student at Miami is that you get a top-notch undergraduate education. We've been rated one of the top public universities in the US for our undergraduate teaching. Our professors, they come to Miami because they love to teach undergraduate students. Sure, like any national university, they're going to be doing research, but teaching is something that's really at the forefront of what we do. And so as a bachelor's student, from your first year, you're going to have access to these experts in the field, which you might not always find at some larger universities, especially in your first year or two. The newest report came out for this ranking, and we were rated the number 2 public school, so we were happy about that as well. A couple things I like to point out really quickly that I think Miami does really well that maybe Well, two things that I think are unique to some extent to U.S. higher education in general that you may not find if you're looking at maybe English language opportunities at in other countries. And I think Miami is a good example of these. One is this ability to combine your interests, right? So in the U.S., typically you'll start with kind of studying general education, a wide variety of courses your first year. And as you progress through the bachelor's degree program, um, you'll become more specialized. And what that allows you to do really is to specialize in more than one thing. Um, so about over half of our students will do a double major or a major in at least one minor, and a minor is kind of like half a major. So let's say, your parents really want you to be a computer science student, but you like theater, you can do both in the US, and that's not always the case in a lot of education systems. Another thing that I think we do well and is a unique opportunity in that we have 30 different fields of study, 30 programs where in 5 or less years, you can earn both a bachelor's and a master's. So you basically will start your master's program before you finish your bachelor's program. We call these combined programs, and they've gotten some popularity in the US. It'll typically save you a year of time and hopefully a year of tuition costs, and you can leave with both a bachelor's and a master's degree. Honors colleges, honors programs, I think, are something else that U.S. universities do well, and Miami is a great example of this. We have an honors college that enrolls about 500 students a year, new students a year, out of our 4,500 new freshmen each year. And these students live in a residential setting, exclusively for honors students. They have access to special programming, special course sections, and it's really a great way if you're a high ability, high achieving student, like I know a lot of you are out there. Honors programs and honors colleges are a great way to really get the most out of your U.S. education. We've actually been rated one of the top 10 honors colleges in the United States, which is um, pretty impressive considering it's a fairly new program for us. Another thing that I think U.S. universities do well is practical training, practical experience, internships, co-ops. So we don't require internships or co-ops at our institution, but over 70% of our students will do one before they graduate. So certainly, while not required, very much a popular option for our students. And if you're looking for postgraduate, employment or um, even experience for your resume before going to, pursuing an advanced degree, this practical training really goes a long way. It's a lot of what employers are looking for, so it's something we really promote with our students. We actually have in our career services office a dedicated position to help both international students find internships and co-ops and to help students find internships and co-ops that are outside of the US. So a lot of different options there. And then finally, I think the student life post or out of class experience, US universities do really well. At Miami, we have 600 different student organizations. So anything you're interested in outside of class, social organization, social justice, environmental, sports. There's going to be a club or organization for you for that. I mean, you're in class about 15 hours a week at a U.S. institution, and you probably should be studying, well, let's say at least twice that much. So that would give you about 45 hours a week. So you do have some time outside of class to pursue interests. And at a university like Miami, where almost all of our students either live on campus or they live in the town in which we're located. Um, it's a great way to continue your education, to continue your experience, outside of the classroom at the end of the day on nights and weekends. Finally, even though there's all these things going on outside of class, you do come to the U.S., you do come to a U.S. university to obtain a degree. And when you do that, you do find a field of study that you have to at least major in. Like I said, you can do more than one, but you have to have at least one. And ours are divided into 5 academic divisions. We have an arts and science college, We have a school of business that is certainly nationally recognized, so it's a very popular option with our international students. We have College of Education, Health, and Society, where we teach things like sports management, but our teacher training programs are there as well. Our College of Creative Arts, where you'll find traditional arts programs like art, architecture, theater, music, but also newer programs like fashion design, computer game design is actually located in our Creative Arts College. And then last but not least, our College of Engineering and Computing is by far our most popular option for our international students. Mechanical engineering is our largest engineering program. Bioengineering is our fastest growing one. But computer science certainly wins the day in terms of most popular option for our international students in terms of major. Um, a lot of students, they ask me, if I'm going to school in a small town in Ohio outside of Cincinnati, what are my chances or what are my opportunities once I graduate? Well, you can see our international students, once they graduate, they go all over the world. So you're certainly not limited to the immediate area once you finish. We prepare students to go everywhere. So, we think we offer a great education at hopefully a reasonable price. And with that, that's just a very quick 5-10 minute introduction about Miami University. Now, for what I really came to talk about, scholarships and financial aid for international students. So there's a variety of types of aid out there, and what they're called can vary. But I put them in a couple of buckets here, just so we can talk about what these are and what the differences between them are. So we have need-based financial aid, merit-based scholarships, and then kind of this one-off is athletic scholarships. And and those I get a lot of questions about those, and so I'll cover those briefly as well. But need-based financial aid and merit-based scholarships are generally the two that you're going to hear about the most. And there's some pretty big differences between them, so I want to kind of get into that. First, need-based financial aid. So it's pretty common. These are awards that are going to be given based on the university's assessment of your financial situation, your family's financial situation, and how much you may be able to afford for your education. So it's not based on your grades or on your test scores. It's really based on your individual financial situation. Most public universities in the U.S. are not able to offer need-based aid. It's just difficult to assess, and they have limited resources to do that. Private universities, however, in the US will be where you can find need-based aid, particularly the more competitive private universities is where you're going to find the larger need-based aid opportunities. There's a few things that come up when we're talking about need-based aid and how to demonstrate your financial need. Like I said, it's based on need versus academics. So how do they assess this need? Well, the one you'll see a lot on US university websites is the FAFSA, the Free Application for Student Aid. And that's actually only for US citizens and permanent residents. So that's not for international students. So a lot of times, especially if you're at a public university, like if you go on our website, you'll see, oh, to be considered for need-based aid, you need to complete the FAFSA. As an international student, as a non-US resident, that's not for you. That's only for those who are US citizens and permanent residents. However, there are a lot of schools then that offer need-based aid to international students that will use an alternate form called the CSS profile. And that is a very in depth is a nice way to put it. An in depth form that's going to ask a lot of questions about your family, finances, your resources, that sort of thing, and ask for additional financial documentation, possibly, income tax information, other opportunities, excuse me, other other documents as well. And then they'll use that to assess your financial need. So CSS profile generally is what's going to be required by private schools to assess your financial need. And some schools now are going to offer, full financial need. If they determine you need, X amount, they will give you that full amount as long as you're admitted um, through a combination, typically of grants, sometimes loans. Uh, or they will maybe give you a part of that amount, which is kind of not ideal for the student, but at least it's something. Now, the flip side of that is what you're going to find probably more common for our international students are merit-based scholarships. Now, these scholarships are generally awarded without regard to your financial needs. So they're really concerned pretty much exclusively with your academic performance. Now, how they assess that can vary by school. At our school, for example, we'll look at a lot of those things in that lower right-hand box, the outstanding academic achievements, GPA, grade point average, which we'll assess in terms of U.S. standards as part of our review process. Some schools will use the SAT or ACT for scholarship awarding, often even though it may not be required for admission purposes. Then they'll maybe look at other things like the types of courses you've taken, leadership potential. So a lot of things can go into what's called a merit-based scholarship, generally awarded by universities. Those are the ones I'm certainly most familiar with. But there are outside organizations out there, both in the U.S. and possibly, in your own country where merit-based scholarships would be available. And then athletic scholarships. So in the United States, it's very unique, I guess is a good way to put it, is that there are sports tied to universities. And certain schools the schools are classified into divisions for sporting purposes, Division One, Two, and Three, and then there's also NAIA, which is a different kind of a different situation. But Division One and Two athletic programs in the U.S. will offer athletic scholarships to really high performing students. These are very competitive, especially at the Division One level, and students really need to plan early for those. Even well over a year in advance. Those decisions for athletic scholarships, you don't ask me. I can't help with those. Those decisions are generally made by the coaches. And you have to generally interact with them directly to ask about scholarship opportunities athletically, and talk a little bit about, your abilities, both academic and athletic, and how you might fit into their program. I think it's important to note here too that not every university offers every sport. So I get a lot of questions from boys, from men who are asking about athletic opportunities, scholarship opportunities in tennis or soccer, for example. Those are two sports that we don't have for men. We have them both for women, but not for men. So not every university offers every sport. So athletic scholarships, super competitive, but they're out there. I know there's a lot of students from the Baltics that are here in the US, pursuing things like track and field or swimming, and they're doing so with athletic scholarships, which is fantastic. Okay, so need-based, merit-based athletics. So how do you get considered for a scholarship? That's probably the most important thing. Some are going to be automatic consideration. So you apply for admission to the university, and then you're considered for both admission and scholarships. Like I said, for the need-based, you're probably going to have to submit additional documents like that CSS profile or other financial information. But merit-based, many of them are automatic consideration. It's called, they'll call it an application for admission and for scholarships. Some, however, are going to require separate application scholarships. And some schools, including ours, are going to have different scholarships, and they're going to have different application processes for those scholarships, even though it's the same school. So I'll get into this in a minute. We offer this scholarship, the You Are Welcome Here scholarship. And that is one scholarship that we have that requires a separate application, but most of ours don't. Anyway, so look, I guess the key is to really kind of look at each institution, look at what types of scholarships they have. Are they need-based? Are they merit-based? And once that determination is made, is how do I get considered for those? Automatic consideration. Do I just apply for admission and I'm automatically considered? Do I need a separate scholarship application? Do I need to submit like a special essay or video to be considered or recommended? Do I need recommendation letters for the scholarship? That can all vary. I would say that first one, automatic consideration, is probably the easiest. It's definitely the easiest for you and probably the most common. So that's a good thing. What else about scholarship application? The other big thing about that is most schools are going to have priority deadlines for scholarships. For us, if you're applying, if you're interested in enrolling in, for example, August 2026, so about a year from now for fall 2026 start, our priority scholarship application deadline is December 1st, 2025. So seems like a ways off, but it's going to be here before we know it. It's less than 2 months away. Um, so always pay really close attention to deadlines. The worst thing to happen would be, you're a great scholarship candidate, but because you missed the deadline, you weren't considered. So that's probably the thing I could stress the most. How to apply and make sure you do it in a timely manner. So there's other things out there besides just these scholarships. I talked a little bit about how internships and co-ops work at our school. Um, and there are schools out there, U.S. universities out there that require co-ops as part of their program. There's a large public university just down the road from us in Cincinnati that's very well known for its co-op program. And one of the benefits of that program for their students is that when they alternate school and work, and when they're in the work phase, they get paid. So that's a great way to pay for some of your education. Now, it takes you longer to graduate and earn your bachelor's degree that way. Their engineering programs, for example, would take more like 5 years versus 4, but they're making some money along the way. Um, Undergraduate research assistantship. So there's opportunities either during the school year or in the summer to connect with a faculty member, a professor, and get opportunities for paid research. That's something we really pride ourselves on. We have a couple thousand students do this each year. And not only do you get great experience, you make a little money as well. On-campus employment, I get asked about this a lot. Students say, well, I'm willing to work on campus to help pay for my education, which is great. You can do that, but U.S. immigration regulations prohibit students from working more than 20 hours per week, and they do require that students only work on campus during the academic year. So that's typically. So the types and amounts of money you can earn are necessarily limited. So that's a great way to make some spending money. I think most of our international students here at Miami, I should have said this at the beginning, we have about 1,000 international students here. Most of them work on campus. But it's really for more like spending money day to day living. It's not going to really pay for any sizable portion of your tuition. So on-campus employment, great option for a lot of students, but not the answer if you need to looking for a way to pay a large tuition bill. And then locally, both here in the U.S. and in a lot of students' home countries, there are trusts, foundations, and other organizations that do provide some small funding for students who want to study either at home or abroad. Again, these aren't probably not going to pay for everything, but if you can cobble some of those together with some on-campus employment, with some internships, with some merit scholarships, you can often find a combination that works for you. Um, so that's kind of the general gist about how scholarships work in the U.S. I'm going to talk a little bit about how they work here because I think we're not uncommon for public universities, although I do think we have a pretty generous process for merit scholarships. But yeah, I'll kind of use it as a little bit of a case study, and then we'll go from there. So the bad news, and this is probably no surprise, U.S. higher education is expensive. Like at Miami University, when you're looking at what we put on the I-20, tuition and fees, housing and food, other expenses, books, travel, insurance, that sort of things. We're talking about, in excess of 66,000 US dollars per year. There are certainly on the public school standards, I'll admit, this is on the higher end. There are cheaper options out there, but I think as the slide says, the sticker price, which is like the price that's written down doesn't always equal the actual price. Like I was just talking about, there's a lot of ways to whittle that down to something a lot more manageable. So through your college search, you certainly need to be cognizant of how much it costs, but also be cognizant of the options that are there to reduce those costs. A school that maybe has a significantly less tuition but has no scholarship or financial aid opportunities may in the long run be more expensive than a school that maybe on paper is a little higher price, but once all those things are taken into consideration, could be a little less expensive. And I hate to admit it as a public school employee, but at private schools especially, you'll see a higher price, higher aid model is much more common. At Miami, we have about four main scholarships that our international students can be considered for. Those two on the left, the International Education Scholarship and the University Merit Scholarship, are the two most common. Those are both automatic consideration. So no separate application is required for those. Actually, well over 90% of our admitted international students received one or both of those scholarships this year. And that's an important thing I should mention too. These scholarships can be combined for students to increase their overall scholarship award. So when you're looking at university scholarship options, it's always good to see if scholarships can be combined. We call them stackable because you can stack them on top of each other to have a bigger scholarship. So last year, our international education and university merit scholarship average was about $15,000 per student who received one. Um, that's average. So we had some students that maybe were closer to the 6 or 8 thousand, and then we had some that were, over $30,000 with those two combined. So those are kind of like I said, the most common ones. Like they're merit scholarships. Like I said, they're really based on GPA, but also some other factors. If you have test scores, if you have English proficiency test scores like a TOEFL or an IELTS or a Duolingo, those are taken into consideration. We look at the strength of your academic curriculum. Did you take challenging courses? That sort of thing. So the two on the left, most common, no separate application. The two on the right, less common, um, but larger scholarships. So the Presidential Fellows Program, a lot of schools will have a program like this. If you apply by December 1st and indicate your interest in the Presidential Fellows Program, you can be considered. There's only 15 of those per year, and that includes both for our U.S. and our international students. So about 2 or 3 international students a year will receive the Presidential Fellows Program scholarship. Um, it's super generous. It pays 100% of tuition and fees and 100% of housing and food, and even gives students a $5,000 per year, $5,000 one-time stipend to do research. So super generous, but as you can imagine, super competitive. A couple thousand international students apply. And like I said, we'll enroll about 2 or 3 with this program. So if you're a really strong student, it's definitely worth your time to check it out. We're waiving the application fee right now for anyone who applies, and so you can be considered for the Presidential Fellows Program. You just indicate your interest in the Honors College, and that consideration will be given. So a lot of schools will have these kind of marquee 100% programs. Um, they're tough to get. Like I said, only a couple a year, but there are students who receive them. For our other unique one is our only scholarship that has a separate application. That's the You Are Welcome Here scholarship. This was started, gosh, probably almost 10 years ago now, um, and encouraging students to come to the U.S. to study who have maybe, an interest in leadership or working across cultures, and this is the only one that has a separate application. It does have a December 1st deadline as well, although we're pretty flexible with that, and a lot of students can get creative with the application. This is also we will take a video instead of an essay, for example, that sort of thing. It's also the only one that's not really academically driven as much. It's more soft, we'll call it like soft skills, right? Like leadership, like working with others, that sort of thing. You know, what can you add to the university community? It pays for 50% of a student's tuition. We do 2 of these a year. And then this one is actually stackable with the International Education Scholarship and University Merit Scholarship. So you can increase, you know, your scholarship award over that 50% per year. So talking about those first year merit scholarships, as I said, they're based on GPA, and that's kind of how it works. So we'll convert your GPA to a US system, which is out of 4.0 or 4.3 if you're using A pluses, and you can see where those scholarship amounts start. You'll see a lot too at public schools. We'll have scholarships for residents and non-residents. So as a public su university supported by the state of Ohio, we have a lower tuition rate for residents than we have for non-residents. Like if you live in Chicago or if you live in Estonia, it's the same price, but if you live in Ohio, it's less. And so, but the scholarships are less too. So we have larger scholarships for anyone who's not an Ohio resident because they pay a higher tuition rate. So there you can see kind of the baseline scholarships. Like I said, the average last year for us was about 15,000. So we tended to award a little bit higher than that chart, but those are what's guaranteed based on grades. Another thing when you're looking at universities and the cost of universities to pay attention to is not only your scholarship amount, but you know, what are the scholarship increases look like? So you're going to be at the university for probably 3 if you're fast, or 4 years for a bachelor's degree, maybe 5 if you're doing a combined program or a co-op program. Um, you know, do the universities increase their cost of tuition every year? Or do they keep it set? So for us, what we do is whatever tuition rate you're paying the day you start, you'll pay that same rate for all 4 years that you're here. So the good news about that is if you have a 50% scholarship your first year, it's going to be a 50% scholarship still your 4th year. We're not going to keep your scholarship the same and then increase your costs. We're going to guarantee that those costs are going to remain the same. So it's a tuition, we freeze the tuition cost. We call it the tuition promise. And a lot of schools are doing that. And I think it's important because you know, even a 3 or 4% increase per year really adds up over the course of 4 years if your scholarships aren't keeping up with that. So anyway, another thing to keep in mind when looking at scholarship costs. So that's really what I had for you today. I was hoping to do it in about 30 minutes. It's about 35, so it was pretty close. Our email is on there. I can put mine in the chat as well, if you have questions. Or yeah, so hopefully at this time I'm happy to answer any questions or um, expand on anything further. I know I blazed through a lot of information quickly, and a lot of it I know is Miami centric, but I think the great thing about the US education system is that it's not centralized. And that's probably the worst thing about it too. It's not centralized, so we're all a little different. So hopefully the generalities I provided will help no matter where you end up.
All right. I think I stop the recording now, and then we can answer some questions.